Hey guys, it's Lee, and in this video I'm going to talk to you guys about how to cut expenses and pay off debt. Now, by the end of this video, you'll be able to follow this simple plan to cut back on expenses, take control of your finances, and pay off debt that's been weighing you down, okay? So watch this video until the very end to get the most out of your personal finance journey. If you're new here, my name is Lee, and this channel is all about investing, personal finance, and money, so hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted every time I upload new content. All right, so let's get right into the video. So when it comes down to cutting expenses, there's a few ways that you're going to approach this, and I'm going to kind of walk you through, my approach to this whole thing. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to do what I call a full budget and money audit. And I'm actually going to make a video on this, so check the description box below because I'll have that link down there once it's ready. But it's exactly what it sounds like. You're going to basically take a look at all of your assets and finances. You're going to find out what your assets are, determine where you're spending your money, and if there is waste. And if so, how much waste is there? Then you want to set some financial goals and create a budget that's going to help you to get to where you want to be. Now, part of the budget creation step is going to include a few things, right? It's going to include you tracking your spending habits for maybe a couple weeks up to a month or so. Or better yet, if you have the ability, you can actually take a retrospective look into your bank account just by logging into whatever bank that you're with. And that's going to give you a crystal clear image in terms of what your spending habits are. Now, once you do that, you can easily identify what you can cut back on immediately and then determine what it is that you might need to work on cutting back if it might take some time to do that. So for instance, if your living expenses are just way high or just astronomical, then maybe you might want to consider moving, but that's not something that you can necessarily do immediately, right? So you need to make a plan for that so that you can move into a more affordable place. Maybe you need to sell your car because your bill is too high. Maybe you didn't have good credit. Maybe you bought too much car. Maybe you need to focus on getting a cheaper, more affordable car. Or if you live in an area that you don't actually need a car at all, maybe just selling your car and getting rid of it altogether. Overall, what you need to be doing in this step is to ask yourself, what expenses can you lower immediately? And there are some things that we have control over in our day-to-day life that we can actually cut back on immediately. One of those things could be utility bills, right? So your gas, your water, your electric bill, maybe you can cut back on some of those energy expenses. So for instance, if it's the winter time like it is right now, maybe you can cut your heat back so that it's not running constantly, and maybe you just put a few more layers of clothes on while you're in the house, and maybe you can do the opposite in the summertime. So that's just one example of how you might be able to cut back on that. The other is going to be subscription services, right? So we all have things like Netflix and Hulu and and now there's Peacock and Disney Plus and things like that. So maybe you don't need all those subscriptions. Maybe you can cut back on those. Maybe your cable bill is crazy high and you can cut back on some of those channels. So those are some things that you can impact immediately in terms of your monthly expenses. And then of course, there's other things that we do and we don't even realize that we're doing, right? Like those coffee breaks that we might take frequently to our local coffee shops during the week or maybe the weekend, the dining out that we do like during the week, just taking our lunch break and going out to eat somewhere, or maybe even on the weekend, maybe cutting back on that. And then of course, online shopping. And this is actually something that you might not even realize that you do. But for instance, for me, I have the Amazon app on my phone and I'm constantly on there looking at stuff that maybe I might want to buy or I might want to, purchase one day and I could see myself, using. And so you find yourself into this sort of endless loop where you're purchasing things online where if you weren't looking at it, you probably, wouldn't be buying things on there anyway. And then of course, you can just decide to only eat at home, right? Or only make your food at home. So bring your lunch to work, make your breakfast, things like that, because that's going to help a lot when it comes down to eating out. You're going to save a ton of money just by making those foods yourself. Then of course, there's the credit card thing, right? Like a lot of times we just indiscriminately put stuff on our credit card, right? So maybe you can cut up those credit cards or put them in a safe for only emergencies or what have you. That might be an option that will have an immediate impact. So now that you've done all those things, right? You figured out what your budget is. You've taken a look at where your expenses are. You've hopefully made some plans to make some cuts and changes in your life that will lead to more money staying in your bank account every month. Now you're ready to actually pay off that debt, right? Now, there are actually a couple ways to approach this. There's probably more than a couple ways, but I'm going to go over two today, right? And I'm just going to lay them both out for you. There is one that I prefer over the other, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But the first method is going to be what they call a debt avalanche. Now, with that, you basically start on those high interest debts first, and you decide to pay those down while paying the minimum on any other debts that you have. Now, this is going to save you money over time when it comes down to interest, and it can actually reduce the amount of time that it takes to get out of debt as well, because you're just focusing on those high interest debts right away. One thing I will say is that it will take you longer before you eliminate each individual account, but overall, it should get you out of debt faster. Now, this method does require a very high level of commitment and discipline as well, and so it's not necessarily ideal for everybody, because if you don't have that real ironclad discipline and focus, then you might find yourself not doing too well with this method. Now, the next one is the one that I prefer, and this is what they call the debt snowball. Now, with this, essentially what you're doing is you're paying off the smallest debts first, so you're essentially attacking the easiest jobs first, right? And once that first debt is repaid, then you move on to that next largest debt, regardless of what the interest rates are for any of your debts, right? So you basically list them smallest to largest and go down the list attacking them. As you go and eliminate one, you take the money that you would have been paying for the first one and you apply it to the second one. And over time, the money that you have available is going to expand, and that's going to help you pay off all of your debts a lot faster overall. Now, this method, the reason why I really like it is because it gives you a really amazing sense of motivation and achievement along the way, right? It's not just like something you finish at the very end and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad this is over. It's been such a long road. You get those mini wins along the way, and that can be really motivating for people who need that motivation along the way as well. And essentially that's going to help people stick with that all the way through. Now, there are some cons to this one. The fact that you're more than likely going to pay more interest over time, and also the fact that it's going to take a little bit longer to be completely debt free as well. Now, there are some things that you can consider doing, when it comes down to being in this debt repayment stage of your life. The first thing is going to be to work on some side hustles. Maybe there's some things that you're really good at. Maybe you build websites. Maybe you're a photographer. Maybe you're good at the building resumes. There's probably something that you can do on the side to help you bring in more money, which you can use to pay down some of those debts. So another thing you can do as well, depending on what your line of work is just to evaluate your career. Are you happy? Are you where you want to be financially with your career? Are you being paid fairly? Could you be paid fairly somewhere else? You want to really have a good sense of your career and, where you are financially. If you're not where you want to be and you're not being paid what you're worth, then you need to decide what you need to do to actually get there so that you can increase your income, be more fulfilled, and be happier with what you're doing as well. And if you do all those things, then paying off debt is going to be a lot easier for you in the long term. Paying debt off is not easy overall, but this is going to empower you and put you in the situation where you can make the best decisions and have the best and biggest impact on paying down those debts. Now, if you actually have some great ideas on how to pay off a debt or maybe cut back on expenses that have worked well for you, leave those in the description box below. They're going to be really valuable for everyone. And hey, maybe you have a way that I've never seen or heard of, and that's going to be pretty cool too. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to be alerted every time I make a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.